Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first installment of Working Through It Wednesdays. I am so excited to have you all here with us. We are going to be presenting on behalf of BASC, the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina, this new skills-based mini webinar series. Our first in this installment features Miss Erin Scherder, and she is a licensed psychoeducational specialist, an advocate for children and families, a school psychologist, as well as a yoga instructor. She is going to be presenting today on educator self-care, which could not be a more important topic. Erin is a lovely individual. We are so grateful to have her here with us today. And without further ado, I present to you all Ms. Erin Scherder.
Thank you, Taylor. That was a wonderful introduction. Yes, it is so true right now that we really need to focus on self-care because educators are being asked to fill many roles as they always have, but during this public health crisis, they've asked to change the way that they teach in new learning environments, provide emotional support for students, maintain communication with parents, figure out how some students are going to be able to learn, and just hope that they're not going to academically regress as well as emotionally regress. So teachers, advocates, parents, staff, students, everybody has been put in this new place right now, and we're all figuring it out together. The hardest part of that is that it's stressful. It causes a lot of stress and anxiety when we shift to different new things, especially some more than others. And right now, the best way to deal with that is through self-care. So we'll talk a little bit about what is self-care because it's not the same for everybody. I'm obviously a yoga instructor and I think yoga is my self-care. It is not going to be everybody's self-care. Some people do not want to do downward facing dog. That actually adds to their stress, and I get that. So we'll talk a little bit about the different domains. We'll get into ways that we can create self-care schedules for ourselves and how to really advocate for ourselves right now. So, why self-care? Many times we think that this is a new term, that it's something new, a new hot topic of sorts within the education system. Everybody's talking about self-care. We didn't talk about self-care back before, we were fine, but actually we've been talking about self-care for a long time. And the reason it's so important is because the best thing about being a teacher is that it matters. The hardest thing about being a teacher is that it matters every day. We'll use this analogy for the oxygen mask. You can't put on someone else's oxygen mask until you put on your own. If you've seen this in the airplanes, they always say, put on your oxygen mask before assisting others. And that's because to be there for someone else, we have to first be there for ourselves. To be there for our students, to be there for our families, we have to be there first for us. We have to take care of ourselves and our needs so that we can support others. We know if you haven't addressed this, you cannot walk into a classroom, virtual or not, and be there for 28 students if you're not first there for yourself. We've seen how that plays out and it is not good. So we're talking about self-care because it's important to teachers, to students, outcomes for schools, as well as families and building relationships. A little bit on the a little bit on the physiology behind stress and emotions. They started studying this in the early 1900s. And this term was kind of coined fight or flight. You've heard of it. You know, if you see something that's scary, you might fight or flight. That fear, do I stay and fight this or do I run? And the thing with that is it's good. It's a good response. Sometimes we do have to have that fight or flight. We have to have a little bit of stress, a little bit of heightened anxiety, because if there's an animal after us, we need to have a fight or flight response. We need our nervous system to kick in so that we can say, okay, this is what we need to do to survive and move forward. However, this happens many times when we're stressed in general, even if there's not an animal after us. If there is a pandemic, say, if there is a stressful event that you hear about, anything that can cause stress for you can cause this fight or flight system to be activated in the body. And that elevates the adrenaline, the cortisol, many things in the body that is sometimes good if you're having to flee a scary situation, but not good if we're constantly in this state because that can damage the body. These life events, these things that are happening to us now, if we don't take care of ourselves, it can have a physiological impact on our bodies. which is very scary and reminds us why we need to take care of ourselves and for our students to take care of themselves as well. The term stress was actually coined in the 1930s, and it's not always a bad thing to be stressed. We know that there's 3 different types of stress. There's positive stress, so you can feel a little bit stressed out when there's a test, or maybe at your wedding. You're going to be a little bit stressed, and that's totally normal. There's a need for that. But at the same time, there's also tolerable stress. There's grief, loss of a loved one, a divorce or something. It's tolerable, it's situational usually, and we know we're going to get through it. So there's that second piece. The third type of stress is toxic stress. And that's this ongoing, strong, frequent, long-lasting stress that can cause impairment to brain functioning because we're in this fight or flight constantly. And it decreases our immune system. It decreases our mental health as well. And we're in this state that's going to impact our bodies for a long time. I only share this because we need to do something about it. We need to do something for ourselves and for each other.
Hey, Erin, I wanted to just chime in for a second. I imagine that given what we've got going on right now with the pandemic, would you say that many of our educators and students are experiencing that toxic level of stress where we would really need to be focusing very heavily on self-care?
Absolutely. We know that you can just hear of an event and it can cause stress. You can hear about something in the news and it can impact you physiologically. And our students are feeling that right now. The news is constantly on. We're in this state of fight or flight where it's long and it's long lasting because we don't know when there's an end. And that's scary for us, but as well as our students and our families. We've had to transition to many different ways of learning and we're adapting, but it's stressful and it's going to become this toxic stress. And that's why we have to have self-care right now. Thank you, Taylor. Just a quick note on teacher satisfaction and stress levels. And this was a survey that was done in 2013 and also another one mentioned here in 2014. You can read here some of the statistics. Teacher satisfaction, look at that one. That's scary, 23% of teacher satisfaction declined from 2008 to 2013. 51% of teachers reported high stress levels several days per week. And only 2% of teachers reported not experiencing stress. Another study in 2014 said 46% of teachers reported a high rate of daily stress. This was all before a pandemic happened. And they were tied with nurses. Teachers were tied with nurses for the second highest stress rate. That tells us right now that not only were we stressed before, but what's going to happen? I wonder where we are with nurses right now. Nurses and doctors are our heroes, and we're trying to stay safe and stay home for them. But at the same time, we really have to remember how to take care of ourselves. There's a cost of caring. Many educators are in this field because they care for students and families and want to be there to help. There's compassion and satisfaction. So there's positive aspects of caring. We feel good when we help others. We feel good when we support our students. We feel good when our students achieve. And that's compassion satisfaction because we care for our students and our families. We have pleasure that's derived from our work. However, unfortunately, this can lead to compassion fatigue. There are negative aspects of a caring profession. We can sometimes care too much, which can lead to burnout quickly. It's usually a gradual onset with burnout. These negative feelings such as frustration, exhaustion, hopelessness, and efforts make little difference. We've all known we've been there at different times. Sometimes it fluctuates. Maybe in August, you may feel different than when you do in May. But there's also this secondary or vicarious trauma that can be a cost of caring as well. So the secondary trauma is when we know that our students are experiencing trauma and we learn about it and we feel it as well. That's probably happening a lot more right now as well when we know students are in the home and they may be in places where they're having some home life issues that we can't control and we might be experiencing it with them. We're concerned students can't get on the internet. We don't know where they are, how to access them, and that can cause a lot of secondary trauma for our educators. So, a little bit on teaching through a pandemic. Here's a link to a great article that we'll share on the website later. And if you'd like, you can always reach out via email if you want the resources sooner. But as we teach through a pandemic, I want you to remember there's a couple main points here for us. Expect trial and plenty of error. We all know we've been there. It's new to us. We're trying to figure it out. What can we do? We're gonna have a lot of trial. But at the same time, we have to be reasonable with ourselves. In fact, it's impossible to shift to distance learning overnight, even though that's what some of us had to do. So expect trial, expect it, plan for it, and do your best to make peace with it. We don't have the time, the tools, or the professional development to figure everything out right now. The next point, give yourself time and permission to figure this out. It's okay. We're going to have to figure it out together, but just knowing that we're not going to be able to do it right now at this moment. And that's hard a lot of times for educators and teachers that always have the answers in the classroom. We are always the experts, and just giving ourselves the time to know that it's okay. We're going to figure this out together. Another point, no human is an island. Humans are social animals. Working from home, or worse, from quarantine, it can be isolating and often depressing for both teachers and students. So reach out to each other. Encourage students to maybe do some types of group activities online together, maybe pen pals, different things to help build connection. Because we are not islands. We need each other. There's many teacher groups and things that we can connect through. Different schools are setting up things, and that's wonderful because we need to be there for each other. Another point, everyone thinks they can't before they can. It's normal to be pessimistic. You know how to teach and you'll figure this out in time. Absolutely, but there will be trial and plenty of error. And lastly, mind the gap. There will be gaps in learning that require more differentiation than ever. Knowing that we have different things going on that we can't control, it's going to be unavoidable. Just know that there will be a gap, and all of us are going to work really hard to figure this out together. The most important thing I can say for self-care to begin as we go into this virtual platform of learning, teaching from home, learning from home, homeschooling from home, being the parents that are helping more and more than ever with this homework and schoolwork, the best thing we can do for ourselves is practice self-compassion. Speaking kindly to yourself, that little inner voice that's in your head that says exactly what we said before. I can't do this. I'm immediately pessimistic. I can't do this. I don't think I can. I don't know how to do this. And this learning platform is so new. I don't know what I'm doing. Instead, stop being your biggest critic and think to yourself, what would someone you love say to you? What would your mother, your spouse, your best friend, your father, what would they say to you? They would say, it's okay. You're going to get through this. You're a smart person. You'll figure this out. Why not say that to yourself? Speaking kindly to yourself can be the easiest way to begin practicing self-compassion. Be kind to you. And do something for the greater good. Taking care of yourself can be the best thing you can do for the greater good. Practicing some self-care and being able to be there emotionally for our students and our families can be the best thing we can do for everyone else. Some other ideas, donating blood, calling someone and checking on them, baking a meal for a neighbor, thinking of different ways that we can create activities for our students that can build in self-compassion, writing some I am affirmations, possibly discussing ways that research activities that have been about pandemics or global crises that people have made it through, and discussing the heroes that have been a part of this and how we can build on that now so that we can begin thinking about some ways that we can be kind to ourselves and each other in this process. Just a note on compassion resilience. There are 4 areas of compassion resilience noted by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction in their Trauma Sensitive Schools project. These 4 components are expectations, having defined and realistic expectations for ourselves and others; boundaries, which we know sometimes we are all not very good at; setting appropriate boundaries for both individuals and the system, and a staff culture, work environment, and connection with our colleagues. We're going to focus on self-care, focusing on caring for ourselves right now. But just know that there are 4 components that go into this: compassion, resilience, building up a resiliency as we have that often compassion fatigue and ways to fight it. Self-care is the piece we're talking about now and one of the most important. So, self-care. Self-care has been defined as providing adequate attention to one's own physical and psychological wellness. That's the definition. One's own physical and psychological wellness. Self-care is not selfish. It is not a once-a-week thing. It is not spontaneous. It's not the same for everyone, and it's not something that others need and you don't. Instead, self-care is responsible. It's small strategies throughout the day. It's not a big thing. It's going to be small pieces that we can put in place, usually scheduled, and it's about what works for you. And self-care is something that we all need.
Hey, Erin, so something I was curious about earlier, you said for you that yoga was definitely your self-care and something that helped you to ground and feel connected. I imagine there's so many things that we could do for self-care. So how do you figure out what's going to work for you as opposed to what might work for me and what might work for my, all of the educators that we have across the state that are dealing with so much of that toxic stress right now and really deserve to find that outlet?
Great question. I think the biggest thing we can do is reflect on ourselves and think, what has worked for me before? What have I done in different situations where I've been able to feel a little bit of peace, maybe possible space, and knowing that we are all going to be different. I was talking to an engineering teacher the other day, and he said his self-care was being out in the woods and building something. That sounds very scary to me. I don't think that would work for me. But that was his self-care, and he knew it because he'd done it before. And after, he was able to feel a sense of calm. So thinking first, have I done something before that's worked? And then secondly, if we haven't really reflected, we're going to get into this next on the 5 different domains of ways to practice self-care. And also there's a self-care assessment that we'll link in. Thank you,
Awesome.
Taylor.
Thank you.
Mhm. So here is the wheel of the domains, the 5 different domains of self-care. Looking at these, we have physical, professional, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and personal. These different domains are not the same for everybody. They can vary based on our time and our situations, our personal beliefs, for example. But the best thing to do is consider multiple domains for your plan. So as we're thinking forward about a self-care plan, thinking of 1 or 2 different things that you can pull from maybe 2 or 3 domains, looking at these and thinking, what's worked for me before, or what do I want to try? And maybe you try it and it works, or maybe you try it and it doesn't work, and that's okay too. But thinking first, what works for me in this way, and maybe pulling from 2 or 3 domains, because we know we can all maybe get in that physical realm and we can really work on exercising and get that exercise down, but we're not looking at all these other areas that we could also be practicing self-care. It's best to pull from at least 2 or 3 of these. Also, there's a link in here for a self-care assessment that we'll share that helps you kind of figure out maybe where you might want to pull or try something different. And it's really important to schedule your self-care. This is one of the most important things. If we don't schedule it, we know we're not going to do it. We all sit there the night before when we're watching Netflix and be like, tomorrow I'm going to do it. Tomorrow I'm going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to bake this. I'm going to do that. And all these different plans that we have. And then we wake up the next day and, oh my goodness, how did I get back here at 6 o'clock at night and I'm ready to watch Netflix again? I've been working all day and it's too late. Now I just want to sit and watch Netflix. And that is totally fine if that is your self-care. But at the same time, thinking about some small things that you can do throughout the day. They do not need to be these big, large plans. that are going to take a ton of time, but maybe just one or two little things. And then once we've got those in our mind, we have to set up some cues for ourselves, some reminders. Maybe the night before when you're thinking, I'm going to do this, I can't wait to do this, we say, okay, I'm going to put out my gym clothes the night before so the next day I can get up and exercise. Because when I see those sitting there, I'm going to have to put them on. And I have to go for a quick run. Not saying you need to work out for an hour or anything like that, but what can you do? Or if maybe you wanted to do some gratitude journaling that we'll talk a little bit about, setting out the journal the night before so when you wake up, it's the first thing you see to get started. Different ways that we can cue ourselves. There's also many apps out there that cue you. So if for you media is getting in the way, there's different things that you can do to set up your phone so that you have certain timers set on different apps and things. Many different exercises that we can do for ourselves to set up these cues, because when we set up a cue and we do something over and over again, eventually it becomes a habit. When we schedule our exercises, whatever they may be across those 5 domains, looking at it throughout the week, maybe you want to use this self-care schedule that we'll link in, which is blank, and you can definitely do that. Or maybe instead you would like to create your own. You've already got a calendar. But writing it down so that we're prepared and ready to go is what's most important. And it keeps us a little bit accountable when it's written down. Maybe you need to share with a loved one too. This is what I'm going to do this week. And that's a little bit of accountability too. Always remember to reward yourself for each one of these habits. Anytime we do something, think kindly to yourself. I am so glad that I did that. I needed it. It's okay to sleep in on the weekends. It's okay to relax and do nothing and watch Netflix if that is your self-care, and reward yourself for it. Just a quick note on compassion resilience. A quick note here on the other areas that we have. Compassion resilience or self-care is also about setting realistic expectations for ourselves and priorities and boundaries. Expectations, realistic ones for yourself and for others, and boundary setting. Know what you want and can say yes to before you get into it. A few tips for expectations and boundaries. Establish realistic expectations for yourselves. For example, what could be some right now that we're thinking about? Maybe we set up times where these are our office hours. This is where I work. This is when I'm available. Maybe we need to say, this is when the email ends, and turn off the notifications on your phone. That's totally okay. That is self-care. And making sure that you set these boundaries so that you're not constantly being bombarded by things is totally appropriate. Setting boundaries for social media, like I talked about, there's an app that you can download if you'd like to do that. There's many different ones that set timers for certain things, or say you've been on Instagram for 2 hours, or you've been on Pinterest for 3. It'll time you and let you know, and just give you a little ding. That's that cue. You've been on here for too long. So another note real quick, just on the media right now, and there's many things out there that are bombarding our senses. We're getting a lot of vicarious and secondary trauma because we're hearing constantly about this is happening here, this is happening there. It's very, very scary for all of us. Setting limits to what we're going to read and when we're going to read it is very important. Getting your information from accurate resources, from the CDC or the World Health Organization, and maybe checking that once or twice a day, and not being inundated with the information, because that can cause a really negative feedback loop that'll lead to constant feelings of anxiety and eventually lead to this increased level of fight or flight where we're fleeing for our lives, even though we're just learning and reading the news. So being prepared and knowing that, setting those boundaries and realistic expectations for you. Maybe you do need to check the phone 2-3 times a day, or maybe just once is okay for you. Setting it for yourself and what works for you is what's most important. Setting priorities and learning to say no. That's a hard one for a lot of us in the helping profession. We want to help. We want to be there for each other, and it's really hard to say no. But know what you need to say no to and be prepared to do that. Eliminate drains and establish these healthy habits. For example, some of these were replacing social media with gratitude expression. Maybe instead of waking up early in the morning to read the emails, we set a priority for the day, or maybe have some positive affirmations. And I'll just note a few things that work for most, because they're not going to work for everybody. A few things that work for me and for most. They may not work for you, and that's totally okay. But this is what works for most people. Eating well, getting some exercise, and getting enough sleep. We know that this is great for the mind, but also it's really good for the immune system right now, which is important. Gratitude journaling as well. Maybe writing down some things that you're grateful for. You can do this in a journal. You could do this on the notes on your phone if you'd like, and just writing down whenever you feel something that you're grateful for. Making a quick note of it can be really important and shift our mind into thinking of things that we're grateful for rather than what we don't have right now, because we know it's very easy to get into that loop of, I'm stressed about this. I can't think about that. This is what I don't have. But instead, remembering what we have and what we can be grateful for really helps in gratitude journaling. It can shift the mind to a grateful place. Some breathing exercises that work. One of the easiest ones, and maybe you've done this with your students as well because it's such an easy one, is belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, if you'd like to call it that. It's just when you inhale, the belly expands like a balloon. And when you exhale, the belly draws in. Inhale, the belly goes out. Exhale, the belly draws in. So it's almost like the air we're breathing in is filling up the belly, and that is going to activate or deactivate actually the fight or flight within the body. So it's going to tell the mind that it's time to relax. It tells your body this is the time where we can release, we can let go. And that breathing is really good for us. Many times if you breathe in the opposite way and you're anxious or nervous, like me at the beginning of this webinar, you breathe in and you get this like shortened breath and you can feel it in your chest and you're like, and you're inhaling very quickly and you're inhaling and your chest is drawing in and the belly's drawing in. That actually creates anxiety and is leading the body and this nervous system to activate our fight or flight system. So if we can just pause and do some belly breathing, it's one of the easiest ways to calm the mind and calm the body. Some apps that work for most: Calm, Headspace, the mindfulness app. There's a daily water app. Maybe your goal during all of this is just to get enough water. That is a huge goal. You're at home now. If you're in education, you know, there's many times where you don't have time to go to the bathroom. So taking advantage of that, we're at home, getting enough daily water intake. There's an app that tracks your daily water here. It takes 21 days for anything to become a habit. So if you can do this for 21 days and be kind to yourself when you do it. I did it. I did the water challenge. I had enough. It helps your immune system. It helps your mental stability. It's just an easy one to get started on. And then some mindfulness exercises. A quick grounding exercise is to just pause and take notice of 5 things that you see, labeling them in your mind. And this is a great one because you can do it with your eyes open. So if you're driving somewhere or if you really need to be on and you can't just stop and close your eyes, you can do this one. It's easy. You just pause, notice 5 things that you see, and then think of 3 things, labeling them, 3 things that you feel in the body. Different sensations, maybe tight muscles, maybe the clothes you're wearing, and then 1 thing that you hear. Noticing these things just allows us to ground the body and mind and come back to a place where we're in the present moment. Because we have all heard that quote. If you're thinking in the future, it creates anxiety. If you're thinking in the past, it creates sadness and loss. So being in the moment is one of the easiest ways to be relaxed and be present. There's also a body scan where you can just pause and take notice from the top of your head all the way down your body, just noticing the different things that you feel, because we've all been sitting like this all day and your jaw is clenched and you didn't even realize it. But as soon as you do a body scan, it's like, oh, my jaw is a little tight. So pausing and releasing the jaw, maybe relaxing the shoulders, and then going all the way down the body, and just giving yourself a mental body scan. It's an easy way to practice mindfulness. And lastly, meditation. There's many apps out there that do guided meditation, as well as you can just practice on your own and notice your breathing and visualize your thoughts in different ways to practice meditation. It's one of the best ways to really, really relax the body and the mind. And lastly, here are some resources to note. These are some of my favorites. self-care educator resources, Brene Brown. This is her podcast on comparative suffering, and then some tools for educators during a public health crisis. There's many more here as well, additional resources. So that is what we have.
Erin, this was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. I think I can speak probably for all of our listeners or those that are watching this feed that, you know, it's so wonderful to have someone give permission to our educators to take time for themselves, to do things that seem as simple as just breathing, and we don't take note of that. To be kinder to ourselves, right? I loved hearing you say that. You're so very right. We are our biggest critics. And with all of this chaos that's going on around us, we have such high expectations. Our teachers, our administrators, our parents, even our kids, they hold themselves to a very high bar. And it's hard to know what those boundaries are. It's hard to really give yourself that freedom to say, I am enough, and to look for those helpers, and to feel calm and feel at peace. So thank you so much. I will make sure that everyone has access to Erin's incredible slides as well as resources. They will be available on our website at www.schoolbehavioralhealth.org/BASK. They will also be available on our Facebook page. So please look for the Southeastern School Behavioral Health Community Facebook page. Erin, I cannot thank you enough. This was fabulous. Our first installment of Working Through It Wednesdays. We've got some strategies for self-care. We've given permission to our educators to do those deep belly breaths. And I'll tell you, I feel calmer and more at peace after listening to you. So thank you so much. And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a nice one.